Today, I'm going over the section in chapter 9 called The Correction of Error. The alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. Egos are critical in terms of the kind of sense they stand for. And he puts sense in italics because the ego doesn't make any sense. They understand this kind of sense because it is sensible to them. To the Holy Spirit, it makes no sense at all. Okay, so the ego makes no sense to Holy Spirit, and Holy Spirit is our true self. To the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. Right? That's what egos do. They're looking for errors. They're looking for things to judge so they can correct them. And again, he's putting correct in quotes because he's being sarcastic. This makes perfect sense to the ego, which is unaware of what errors are and what correction is. Errors are of the ego, and correction of errors lies in the relinquishment of the ego. When you correct a brother, you are telling him that he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, but it is certain that if he is speaking from the ego, he will not be making sense. So he's trying to point out that even though from our ego perspective, we can look at other egos and find things that are wrong and try to make sense of it, but that's all backwards. This is not what Jesus is teaching us to do in this course. We're supposed to be overlooking egos and the wrong things that they are doing, because when we are seeing that, it is simply a projection coming from our own mind, projecting out into the world. So what he's teaching us to do is to overlook, to look beyond, to use our spiritual sight. So even though egos appear to do some crazy stuff that makes no sense at the time, he's telling us that's what egos always do. Egos always don't make sense, right? So he's saying don't even pay attention. But your task is still to tell him he is right. Now, not from the ego perspective. That's not what he means. Telling him that he is right means practicing forgiveness in your mind. You don't have to tell him or her anything with your words. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with how you're seeing them in your mind. If you see them as pure spirit, then you are telling them that they are right. Why? Because all minds are joined. So when we perceive another out in the world as being right, okay, not from the ego perspective, not with worldly stuff, but right meaning that they are also spirit, that they are also love and light. When we do that, we are reinforcing that within ourselves. And that is what he is teaching us to do here. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly, right? I just said that. He needs correction at another level because his error is at another level. So now he's talking about the spirit level. And our brother's error, or sister, remember the male labels don't mean anything. So we're not going to tell a brother that they are behaving foolishly. He or she needs the correction at another level, which is the level of spirit. And we do this by practicing forgiveness. This is how we tell another that they are correct. And when we do that, we're telling ourselves that at the same time, that we are also correct. He is still right because he is a son of God. That's why we are all really still right, because we all are a son of God or daughter of God, a child of God. His ego is always wrong, no matter what it says or does, right? That's true for all of us. All of our egos are always wrong. So anytime we believe the world is real, and anytime we believe that any wrong has been done to us, or that we are doing wrong to anyone else, that's wrong. Because we are believing in the ego, and we are believing in the world of separation. And that's not our truth. If you point out the errors of your brother's ego, you must be seeing through yours, because the Holy Spirit does not perceive his errors. So again, if we are judging out in the world, then that's our tip that we are perceiving with our ego. And the Holy Spirit does not perceive ego or judgment, because it's not real. It's an illusion. This must be true, since there is no communication between the ego and the Holy Spirit. The ego makes no sense, and the Holy Spirit does not attempt to understand anything that arises from it. Why? Because it's an illusion and it's crazy and it makes no sense. Since he does not understand it, he does not judge it, knowing that nothing the ego makes means anything. Why does the Holy Spirit not understand the ego? Because it's insane, and Holy Spirit is not insane. And Holy Spirit knows that ego is false, that it's an illusion. When you react at all to errors, you are not listening to the Holy Spirit. He has merely disregarded them, and if you attend to them, you are not hearing him. So again, they're telling us that Holy Spirit overlooks these errors, overlooks the ego. So if we don't do that and we focus on the ego and we focus on things that we think are wrong, then we are not listening to Holy Spirit. If you do not hear him, you are listening to your ego and making as little sense as the brothers whose errors you perceive. Okay, so if we're judging others in the world as being insane because of what they're doing, their wrongdoing, we're doing the same thing. Now we're in our ego and we're also doing wrong. Okay? We end up being just as crazy as that other ego we're judging. This cannot be correction, right? We can't correct that way by judging others and trying to fix things in the world. That's not how it works. Yet it is more than merely a lack of correction for him. It is the giving up of correction in yourself. When a brother behaves insanely, you can heal him only by perceiving the sanity in him, which means overlooking the ego and focusing in on spirit. That's the sanity that we're looking for in others. If you perceive his errors and accept them, you are accepting yours. So if we perceive another as ego, then we are perceiving ourselves as ego. If you want to give yours over to the Holy Spirit, you must do this with his. Unless this becomes the one way in which you handle all errors, you cannot understand how all errors are undone. How is this different from telling you that what you teach, you learn? Your brother is as right as you are, and if you think he is wrong, you are condemning yourself. More fancy words to say, if we perceive others as egos, we are perceiving ourselves as egos, and then we are just as insane as the behavior that we just judged in them. And the way to correct and heal that is by overlooking the false ego and focusing on spirit. Then we have allowed correction to come in. So the reason that our brother is as right as we are is because our brother is spirit, just like we are. You cannot correct yourself. Is it possible then for you to correct another? Yet you can see him truly because it is possible for you to see yourself truly. It is not up to you to change your brother, but merely to accept him as he is. His errors do not come from the truth that is in him, and only this truth is yours. His errors cannot change this, and he can have no effect at all on the truth in you. To perceive errors in anyone and to react to them as if they were real is to make them real to you. You will not escape paying the price for this, not because you are being punished for it, but because you are following the wrong guide and will therefore lose your way. All right, so when we perceive others as ego, and therefore we are perceiving ourselves as ego, and therefore we suffer because of it, that suffering isn't punishment. We're not being punished by anyone. We're just making the wrong choice and we're causing our own suffering. That's why he's explaining to us here how to correct that misperception. So whenever we're choosing ego and perceiving from our ego perspective, we have lost our way. Your brother's errors are not of him any more than yours are of you. Accept his errors as real, and you have attacked yourself. If you would find your way and keep it, see only truth beside you, for you walk together. The Holy Spirit in you forgives all things in you and in your brother. His errors are forgiven with yours. Atonement is no more separate than love. Atonement cannot be separate because it comes from love. Any attempt you make to correct a brother means that you believe correction by you is possible. And this can only be the arrogance of the ego. Correction is of God, who does not know of arrogance. So we can't fix a brother. We can't even fix ourselves. We have to let Holy Spirit do it. But remember, Holy Spirit is a higher aspect of ourselves. We are Holy Spirit. So by allowing our mind to connect with that higher aspect of ourselves, our higher mind, to allow it to come in and heal, this is how we correct a brother and correct ourselves. It's about perception. So we're never correcting anyone out in the world. As soon as we try to do that, that's ego. So we need to invite Holy Spirit in to take over our mind and show us the truth, which is love, and that we are one with all of our brothers. And whenever we are perceiving something from the ego's perception, it's arrogant. The Holy Spirit forgives everything because God created everything. Do not undertake his function, or you will forget yours. Accept only the function of healing in time, because that is what time is for. God gave you the function to create in eternity. You do not need to learn that, but you do need to learn to want it. Okay? We're always resisting it. That's why we even perceive with the ego, is because we are hiding from our truth and hiding from God. So by allowing Holy Spirit to take over our mind, we are slowly allowing ourselves to want this healing, this correction. So he's saying, do not undertake his function, meaning don't try to be an arrogant ego and go out and try to fix other people. His, with a capital H, means Holy Spirit. His function is to heal. And how do we do that? By allowing Holy Spirit to heal our own mind. So when we practice forgiveness with Holy Spirit and perceive ourselves as spirit and others, this is where the healing happens. This is where the correction happens. And he's telling us that the only function of illusory time is to give us as much time as we need to remember to want our truth, to remember to forgive. That's the only thing that time is for, he's telling us. Because God gave you the function to create an eternity. That's our truth. Truly, we are spirit extending love eternally with one another and with God. That's what heaven is. It's a state of oneness. That's our truth. That is the function that God gave us. So he's telling us that we don't need to learn that, but we do need to learn to want it, right? Because we can't correct our own mind. We need to learn to want Holy Spirit to take over our mind. We need to learn to want to practice forgiveness. And the truth is, those of us who have been practicing forgiveness and using it, we see how much peace it brings, how much healing it brings. So the more we do it, the more we're going to want it. Now, as we are going through that process, the ego is going to be fighting tooth and nail, and will do everything it can to keep trying to derail us from wanting our truth and from wanting love and light and for wanting peace. It will keep trying to resist it. So that's why we need to be vigilant. He's always telling us to be vigilant only for God. And Holy Spirit is the representative for God within our illusion. For that, all learning was made. This is the Holy Spirit's use of an ability that you do not need, but that you made. We don't need the ego. We don't need the false world. We don't need the illusion, but we made it. We did it. So that's why Holy Spirit is here to help correct that mistake. Give it to him, he says with an exclamation mark. He's saying this is a great thing to do. Just give it to him. You do not understand how to use it. No, we don't. This is why we need to let Holy Spirit guide us. We don't understand anything. He will teach you how to see yourself without condemnation, by learning how to look on everything without it. Meaning, We will learn to see ourselves without condemnation when we learn to see the world without condemnation. Condemnation will then not be real to you, and all your errors will be forgiven. That's so beautiful. That is the gift that this course is attempting to give us. And when all of our errors are forgiven, the illusion disappears and we return home to God.